Okay, welcome back. We were just talking about ice ages a little bit, and I was just commenting on how a planet has to start being considered as a living creature also. That it also has to go through evolutions just like every other life form inside of creation. This will be kind of an eye-opener for a lot of people, but that's what ice ages are all about. This gives the ability of the planet to go through its sleep state. All forms of spirit forms of all types in creation go through a wake and a sleep period. We go through a death cycle. That's our sleep period. The planet can't disappear and go into a fine matter world, so it has an ice age. And an ice age is a deep sleep that the planet goes into. At first, the few times it happens on a planet, the whole planet is covered with ice. And then it becomes less and less as it goes on. Eventually it evolves up to the point where it doesn't need to do hardly that at all, because the planet starts being covered by higher evolved life forms. The planet itself then only has ice ages in areas generally where it's not harmful to the life forms. But each time it goes through an ice age, all of the plants, animals, and even humans are affected by this, and it's a way of pushing up their evolvement. So everything evolves to a little higher state. A plant will come back as a more beautiful plant. A tree will evolve into something nicer. Even the animal kingdom, like a mammoth evolved into being an elephant. Now, ice ages on Earth are every 700,000 years for the major ice age. This is because there's a rhythm to how the ice ages work. People into biorhythms will probably pick up on this right away. I unfortunately don't understand that real well. But I do know that, as she's explaining it, the natural numeric system of the creation is based on sevens. And consequently, the natural rhythm of our planet is 700,000 years for these major ice periods to happen. At that time right now, they're covering 1/6 to 1/4 of our planet. We've had 4 major ice ages the last 2,800,000 years. That's the amount of surface area that was covered during each one of those. There are also interglacial periods between those 700,000 years. These come about every 350,000 years, and they are much smaller. They cover only about 1/10 to 1/12 of the planet. So there's been a total of 12 seeming ice periods in the last 2,800,000 years. The next interglacial period will be in about 150,000 years. We also have things called glacial wandering or glacial shifting, which the rhythm for that is much faster. They come about every 70,000 years, and this can confuse scientists a little bit when they're trying to pinpoint when the next ice age may actually come. So all of these periods have their own rhythms, and they're all corresponding to the 7x7 numeric nature of the creation itself. Okay? Billy raised another question about Pope Paul VI, and who he had been told earlier would be poisoned and is dead, but at the time he was still in office. And so he was, of course, kind of concerned about that, and he said, I thought she's supposed to be dead. And Semjase remarked that he is. That actually the chairs, the cardinals of Rome, who control the popes, had, through association with the Jewish Zionist extremists, poisoned Pope Paul VI. The man who was then looking like Pope Paul VI was an imposter, and that actually they had found someone that looked like him, done some alterations to make him look like it. They'd even gone to the problem of erasing the birth certificates, school papers, and all the records they could find of the original Pope Paul VI to hide what they had actually done, so people really wouldn't recognize or ask any questions that might cause problems. Billy wanted to know if there was any life on any of the planets again in our system. She said no. And he said, well, how about extraterrestrial bases on Jupiter? She said no, but on the moon called Ganymede, there was an extraterrestrial base there. That extraterrestrial base was founded and operated by the B'Phath intelligence. And again, the B'Phath intelligence is also sometimes called the Giza intelligence, because these were the beings, the extraterrestrial beings, who were hiding out below the Great Pyramid of Giza and have tried to cause Billy so many problems. Another interesting note, we talked earlier about Saint Germain, this guy Rokosky that lived as the man Saint Germain, who was kind of a trickster, magician, and fraud. We're going to talk more about reincarnation and life cycles later on, but she pointed out to Billy that he has reincarnated. He's not aware of it, but the man who was once thought of as being Saint Germain is now reincarnated in a new life. He was born in Bohemia, and he's now known as Prince Roger de Pulaski. and he lives in Germany. And Billy was just kind of knocked out by this because they were able to track this guy, watch his new life cycle, see him be born as a different individual, and he wanted to go meet him and just, I guess, to check him out. And Semjase remarked, no, stay away from him because he's just as deceitful, just as much of a fraud. It's just as much of a wasted life as it was in his previous life when he was Saint Germain. So Billy never made really any attempt to find the guy. There was a question about the White Brotherhood. They say that there are spiritual centers that they are in control of or are using the forces of. Places in, like in Peru in the Andes, a place called Meru, M-E-R-U. There's another place in Uxmal in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, outside of the city of Merida, if you've ever been out there. And there's a place, the Royal Teton in Wyoming, and a place called Banff in Canada. And Billy wanted to know if these centers were actually places where their spiritual powers were talking to people. Okay, that's what the White Brotherhood apparently says. And she says, no, this is total nonsense, that the White Brotherhood, being a very powerful organization, has a lot of old knowledge. And she says they are aware, I guess you could call it a mind trick, where you can have a large group of people concentrate their thoughts on one particular spot. Like say you get 1,000 people together and you want them all to concentrate on one particular exact location. What happens is, she says, when all of their thoughts actually do converge on that one location, there's kind of a block of energy that forms right there, and it causes a reflection or an echo that bounces back to the person who's sending the thought. And they perceive that, they're confused, they somehow think that they're being spoken to by a spiritual entity. They're not. It's just their own thoughts bouncing off this block where the convergence is. Unfortunately, apparently the White Brotherhood uses this as some sort of trick to get people to follow them or whatever. There's another question about the drive system of the Beamships. That was asked earlier, and she reiterated, that the old Beamships, as they were called, worked on kind of a light bundling system. Bundle was the word that they used, but they haven't built those for about 400 years. When Billy took the first pictures of Semjase's ship, that was a Beamship. It worked on that light principle. And those ships give off some amount of radiation. And she isn't using that ship any longer. She had a new ship. Her new ship used an anti-gravity drive, and it was based on a different principle of dischargement, whatever dischargement means. She says this ship had this anti-drive was used for planetary drive, and they used a tachyon drive in space. And she says it's based on faster than light particles that, as our scientists learn to understand them, will begin to name them tachyons. The present ship that she was in at that time for the contact, she says, has a different kind of drive system. It's called an antimatter drive. By the way, that ship weighs 1.5 tons, she said. Billy was kind of surprised, and he says, you mean antimatter actually exists? She says, oh, sure. There is an entire antimatter world. As she'd explained to him once before, there are even parallel universes. So in the antimatter, I don't know that there are worlds in the antimatter world, that there is. They just said there's an antimatter world and did not really define more about it, except that there's an immense amount of energy that somehow can be pulled out of this antimatter dimension or world, whatever it is. Billy was intrigued with Quetzal's name and said it sounds a lot like Quetzalcoatl, the old South American folk stories, and was there any relation? And she said, no, not at all. The Quetzalcoatl was the old times, was a very high officer actually in Egypt, and he took upon a special mission to go to South America, to the land of the Aztecs. And when he went from Egypt to South America, he had a small spacer ship. And when he landed with his spacer ship, of course, it was very impressive with the local Aztecs, and they regarded him as a god and a great leader. But he ran into another man there similar to himself of great power, which I can't begin to pronounce. It's spelled Huitzilopochtli. So I guess that would be like Huitzilopochtli or something. Anyway, a battle ensued between these two powerful people, and Quetzalcoatl lost out. Somehow intrigues got too strong and forced him out of South America, and he returned to Egypt. But that's where the legends stem from. Billy wanted to know about Great Atlantis, that he was not satisfied with the first explanation that yes, it did exist. He wanted to know a little bit more about it. She says, okay, she'd like to talk about that. That actually there were two Atlantises. There was the great continent of Atlantis, which spread the land barrier between the Americas and all the way over to Europe and Africa. That was originally founded by a Vega man named Atlantis. His wife's name was Caratide. Her father's name was Meiers, M-U-R-A-S. He founded the continent of Mu, which was in the Gobi Desert in China. But there were two Atlantises. There was the great continent there. His wife, Caratide, started like a smaller colonization of Atlantean people in the area we now think of as the Mediterranean Sea, around the Santori Islands, or Santori area right in there. And she says what happened was that when Atlantis finally fell during the Great Wars, that small Atlantis lived on for almost 6,000 years, some of the people who survived that. But there came a time when, which was 3,500 years back, when the great destroyer comet came close to Earth, had Venus in tow. It once again had pulled Venus out of its orbit, and it came close enough to the planet that it caused great destruction here on Earth. Mostly, the side of the planet, the Mediterranean side, was facing the great comet when it went by, and it pulled all the water out and caused waves up to 200 meters high, flooded all over Egypt, Crete, and Syria. Volcanoes erupted, the ocean floor was broken loose, and most of those small islands, the Santori Islands, sunk below the sea, and most of the inhabitants that had survived there in Little Atlantis died out. Crete at that time was called Minoa, M-I-N-O-A. Descendants of Atlantis, they survived there, but most of the islands were gone. So there was mainly two Atlantis colonizations, the very large one and the small one started by his wife Caratide. Mu, on the other hand, was a colony of Lyrians, and there was a city under Mu in the Gobi Desert, and that's where Agharta was and still is. Actually, there are two Agharta cities. There's a large one, Agharta A, and there's a smaller one that's connected by a tunnel called Agharta B. Apparently it was like just a rural outgrowing or something. Each city, they're independent. Each one has a man and a woman who are the leaders of those cities. Billy had a question about extraterrestrials and Earth people about dying and being able to go to another planet. He wanted to know if an extraterrestrial died, say, for on his own planet somewhere out in space, could he somehow then be born here on Earth? Or vice versa, could someone die here on Earth and then cause themselves to be reborn on another world, like a Pleiadian world or something? She says, no, this is not possible. That part of the fixed laws or truths, the way creation operates, is that the physical body and the spirit body are bound to the planet when they die. When you pass on, your spirit is somehow connected to this planet body that it's on through some force of nature, and it's not possible. If you want to die and be born on another planet, I suggest what you do is you get a ride on a Beamship, you go to another planet, as soon as they open the door, and you walk out on the other planet, kill yourself somehow so you can die on another planet, and then you'll come back on that other planet. That's about the only way it's going to happen. So there's really no truth to these stories we're hearing about people claiming that they're going to die and they're going to ascend to another dimension and that they're going to go on and live on another planet. It's just not possible. There was a question about colors and levels of consciousness, and this is an area I don't understand too much, but for those of you who do, I'm familiar with colors in meditation when you sink into meditation, but there are colors related to the level of consciousness, and they are called the radiation values, is what the Pleiadians call them. They don't mean too much to me, but I will put in the exhibits, I'll put a page in there listing all of the numbers, the colors, and what they mean, and they are somehow related to our levels of consciousness. So those of you who are into that, you may find that interesting. Just roughly, the first value is pink, number 2 value is violet, 3 value is green, 4 is golden red, 5 is golden, 6 is white, and 7 is blue. Questions about disease were asked, and Semjase remarked, yes,